The wreckage drifted in the dead zone between the stars, a quiet graveyard of metal and memory. Once the flagship of the Terran Defense Accord, the dauntless horizon now spun aimlessly, a broken hull screaming silence into an uncaring void. No transmissions, no flares. Just corpses frozen in cracked armor, except one. Her heartbeat was faint, slow, buried beneath half a kilometer of twisted alloy and collapsed bulkheads. Suspended in the cryopod she wasn't meant to wake from. Commander Ilara Khan slept on, a ghost kept alive by a glitch in a system no one remembered to shut down. She had been left behind. 2 years ago, the humans signed the Concord, a treaty, a surrender. The alien architects of the Varan Pact demanded peace in exchange for Earth's survival. But the price was high. The outer fleets, those who resisted, were deemed rogue, disposable. Betrayal was rebranded as diplomacy. The dauntless horizon had refused to kneel. Ilara remembered the last moments before stasis, the alarms, the breaches, the voice of Admiral Thorm crackling through the speakers, calm and cold. No reinforcements. You are to be scuttled for peace. The war hadn't been lost. It had been bartered away. Now, time moved like dust. Lights flickered once every rotation. The ship's Omai was long dead. The crew entombed. Ilara's pod, insulated in subdeck engineering, kept her alive only because a backup capacitor hadn't yet failed. Until something changed. A light, barely a pixel of warmth in the abyss, flared on the horizon. It wasn't alien. It was Terran, human, and it was coming toward her. 15 hours earlier, aboard the Argent Wake, Captain Idris Harlan scowled through the Prythias. Bridge viewport, arms crossed over a scarred pressure vest. "Are you sure?" he asked his nav officer, a pale, sharp-featured girl with retinal implants humming low. "Positive," she said. Signal spike, decaying but identifiable. Accord era frequency, wrapped in blackout encoding. "It's old." "Captain, how old?" She hesitated. Dauntless old. Idris didn't speak. Not at first. That name carried weight. The dauntless horizon had been the Terran spearhead, the fleet's pride before the Concord betrayal. It had gone dark. During the last skirmish with the Varan, official record claimed it was lost in combat. But unofficially, those who'd served before the treaty whispered different things. Orders given, reinforcements denied. It wasn't destroyed. It was silenced. "Plot a course," Idris finally said. "Full burn, we make contact or we die trying." The silence cracked. A distant rumble echoed through the corpse of the Dauntless. Internal sensors flickered, detecting energy. A hull breach alarm, faint, confused. And then, light, real light. Not the flicker of dying panels, but floodlights, external. Probing, searching. A drone crawled into the hull. Ilara's cryopod registered it, recognized the Terran signature. Systems whirred to life with a groan. Power surged, dangerously unstable. Her pod seal released with a hiss like a dying breath. Ilara Khan opened her eyes. She gasped, then screamed. Pain lanced her muscles. Her skin burned from frostbite. Tall, her lungs heaved at stale air. Her first sight was the drone's lens hovering above her like an alien eye. Then came the voice, crackling, human. "This is Captain Idris Harlan of the Argent Wake. If you're alive in there, stay with. U.S. You're not alone." Ilara couldn't respond, not yet, but her eyes filled with tears. Not from the cold. From the realization that someone had come back. Hours later, in the medbay of the Argent Wake, Ilara's fingers trembled as she sipped rehydration fluid. Idris sat beside her. The man looked like war. Tired eyes, silver at his temples, a knife strapped to his boot like an old habit. "You're supposed to be dead," he said quietly. They made sure of that, Ilara rasped. They made us believe it was mercy. It wasn't mercy, she said, eyes burning. It was politics. A silence stretched between them. Then Idris leaned forward. We've been collecting ghosts. You're not the only one left behind. There are others, cells, survivors, ships that broke from the Concorde's leash. Ilara stared at him. You building something? He nodded. A fleet, maybe a future. And you think I'll help? I think you already have. She stood alone in the cargo bay later, watching as engineers stripped salvage from her old ship's remains. Among the twisted steel, they found her crew's tags. 79 dead. She whispered each name. And when she reached the last, Lieutenant Soren Dax, her XO and friend, she didn't cry. She just whispered, "They will answer for you." From the far side of the stars, a low pulse echoed. A Varan patrol ship, cloaked, stirred in its orbit. It had seen the light too, and it had begun to move. We thought the war was over. The enemy never stopped watching, and now they know we're waking up. The Argent Wake fell back from the dead flagship's orbit, its engines humming low like a predator holding its breath. Ilara Khan sat, upright in the medbay now, her vitals stable, body weak but aware, her thoughts sharper than they've been in years. She could feel it, a tremor in the void, a shadow just beyond sensor range. The Varan didn't miss signals, especially not from dead ships reborn. On the bridge, Captain Idris Harlan read the telemetry in silence. Varan tech was cloaked, efficient, wrapped in phase-bending alloys that bent light and logic. But the old Terran tricks still worked. Bounce back scatter from deep wave pulses and listen for the ripple. And the ripple had returned. 2 contacts, stationary, no drive signatures, his nav officer said, voice cold. They're watching. Idris cursed under his breath. No way they didn't hear us. They didn't fire, she added. They're waiting, measuring. Idris stared at the empty black. Not empty. Never truly empty. The Varan were strategic, precise. If they were here, it wasn't coincidence. It was calculus. He opened comms. Han, suit up. We need to talk. Ilara stood on the viewing deck in full armor. The Terran Navy's faded black now patched with burn marks and salvage seams. Her eyes were tired, but no longer dulled. She gazed out at the wreckage of her ship, then at the stars beyond. I remember the day they came, she said quietly. The Varan didn't ask questions. They didn't issue demands. They just sterilized orbital zones, launched nerve pulse torpedoes into refugee base, and jammed emergency channels. The message was simple. Obey or disappear. Idris stood beside her. They called it peace. It was extermination. You're not wrong. Ilara's jaw clenched. And Earth agreed to it. Idris hesitated, then nodded. They feared extinction. The Accord bought them time, but not freedom, not dignity, and certainly not justice. So what now? She asked. We salvaged a corpse and woke a ghost. What's next? He turned toward her. We light the match. The Varan patrol ship activated without warning. 1 second, it was cold and invisible. The next, its silhouette cut the void like a blade of night. No lights, no radio. Just movement, direct and precise. They're coming in hot. The bridge cried. No comes, no hails. It's an intercept vector. Idris didn't flinch. Ray shields, arm ion casters. Khan, get to the gunwale. The old commander was already running. Muscles ached, lungs burned, but her fingers found the interface like muscle memory. She slid into the gunwale cradle, locking into the external turret chamber. HUD syncing with the pulse of the enemy ship's approach. Target locked, she said. I see one. Only one? Came the voice in her ear. She stared harder. Her blood went cold. No, 2. The second one is behind us. Silent. We're boxed in. Full burn. Port angle. Idris barked. Split vector. Drop decoys. The Argent Wake rolled violently. Decoy beacons scattered into the dark. One of the Varan ships surged after the bait, but the second stayed on course, a cold spear of war racing toward them. Weapons flared, silent flashes in the void. The ship rocked violently. Console sparked. The hull groaned, shields holding. But one more direct hit. Alara's hands moved faster than her thoughts. Her turret swiveled, locked, and released. A thunder of plasma bolts that tore through the stars and kissed the Varan ship's side. She didn't expect to destroy it, just draw its attention. And she did. The ship pivoted toward her turret and fired. The impact threw her from the cradle. Pain exploded in her shoulder. Blood filled her helmet. She screamed as the pressure. Seals blew and vacuum kissed her skin for a fraction of a second before emergency bulkheads slammed down. Idris's voice thundered through the static. "Khan, respond!" She coughed, eyes blurred, ears ringing. Still breathing. Hull breached near gunwale. "I've got pressure but limited visuals. We're bleeding. If that second ship gets a lock, we're done." She closed her eyes, then opened them. "I have an idea." 20 minutes later, the Argent Wake drifted, cold, quiet, silent. Power signatures cut. No movement. Emergency beacons deactivated. The ship played dead. The Varan circled slowly, scanning, hunting. Inside the hull, Alara knelt beside the ion core, sweat pouring down her back as she reprogrammed the diagnostic drones with override commands only fleet commanders used. Commands she'd memorized before they left her to die. "Okay, old girl," she whispered. "Let's see if you remember how to bite." Idris waited at the helm. The Varan ship was 300 meters off their bow now. "Ready," Alara said. He smiled grimly. "Then let's remind them who they're dealing with." The Argent Wake lit up like a solar flare. Ion casters surged to life. Shield resonance reversed, creating a feedback loop. The fake power-down trick had drawn the enemy in, and now it was inside the blast radius. A pulse cannon detonated. The Varan ship fractured mid-hull, tearing open like a cracked bone. It spun off, trailing molten wreckage. The second ship fled. Later, in the darkened medbay, Alara sat with her shoulder wrapped, staring at the report. On the screen, "They weren't just patrolling," she said. "They were listening." "Listening for what?" She glanced up. "For signs of life." Idris narrowed his eyes. "They know we're still out here," Alara whispered. "And now, they'll come in force." The bridge dimmed. Silence returned. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that hung before a storm. Far across the stars, in the cold citadels of the Varan core, war councils stirred. A dead woman had awakened, and now humanity had whispered back. The flicker of jump signatures vanished behind the Argent Wake as the crew finished emergency repairs. Bulkheads hissed shut. The wounded rested. Alara Khan stood in the tactical bay, staring at a star map scarred with ghost signatures and red-marked. Dead zones? Once these were Terran patrol sectors. Now they were labeled surrendered, thin veils over graves. "Any word from the relay?" Idris asked, stepping beside her. "No response." "Either it's dead or compromised," she replied, arms crossed, jaw set. "We're not going to get a distress signal through. And even if we did, Earth wouldn't answer. Not for us." He nodded grimly. "Then we make someone else listen." A low beep echoed, a proximity ping from the nav deck. Not a ship. A signal, pattern, faint. Alara moved instantly. "Bring it up," she ordered. The screen shifted, displaying a warped analog pulse frequency. No encryption. Old Earth standard code, broadcast in rhythm. Idle and protocol, subsector. 9G, Haven anchor point active. We remember. Come home. Alara inhaled sharply. She hadn't heard those words in years. The Eidolon Protocol, she whispered. It's real. Idris blinked. That's a myth. Supposed to be a failsafe. A sanctuary hidden after the Varan push. Not a myth, she said, eyes shining. A vow. I helped draft it. Ghost squadrons. Buried fleets. Off-grid bastions, in case command ever turned on us. You're saying there's a fleet out there, waiting. More than a fleet. Alara said, a rebellion. The Argent Wake followed the pulse through a storm of black matter and asteroid fragments. Sector 9G was beyond most charted paths, the kind of place no trade vessel would ever go, and even Varan ships avoided. The message had bounced between derelict buoys, triangulated through ancient code embedded in cum dust. Days passed. Then they found it, a hollow moon, artificial, cracked like a shell. But inside was light. A hidden station nestled. In the core, cloaked by the moon's crust and long-range jammers, a Terran anchor point, one of the last. They docked in silence. No alarms, no guards. Just a single man in a faded pressure suit waiting near the airlock, holding a weapon with a jury-rigged power cell and a carved nameplate. Rourke. He didn't speak at first, just stared at Alara. I watched your funeral, he said finally. 12 of us cried in a bunker with one bottle of recycled bourbon. We thought you were gone. Apparently, I'm harder to kill than a treaty, she replied. He cracked the first smile in days. Then maybe there's hope. The Eidolon cell wasn't large. 43 humans, ex-Navy, ex-civilians, one ex-admiral, Malavos, once a fleet commander, now chairing war councils from a rusted control throne. The station ran on fusion scrubbers and old reactor rings patched from scrap. But they had weapons, fighters, and above all, they had memory. They remembered Earth before the surrender. They remembered Terran pride before the Vern's peace. And they were waiting for a spark. In a circular war room beneath the anchor core, the rebellion met. Alara stood before the gathered few. You think we're too few, she began. Too weak. The Devaran control the skies and the Concord controls the truth. Maybe that's all true. But here's what else is true. They didn't expect me to live. They didn't expect us to find each other. And they damn well don't expect us to fight. Murmurs moved through the crowd. We don't need to win every battle. Just the right one. Just once. We punch them in the mouth hard enough that they remember what it cost to silence a human voice. A younger fighter raised his hand. But how? A strike? Not yet, Idris replied. Information. We make the truth louder than their lies. Rourke stepped forward. There's a Varan command node, Relay Prime, on Kirima Drift. Not just a military hub. It's where they process internal Concord reports. Earth's entire treaty narrative comes from what's sanitized there. Which means, Alara said, eyes narrowing, if we hijack the data node, we can show Earth what really happened. Mass executions. Scuttled fleets. Civilian colonies marked as uninhabited zones. They'll see it. Everyone will. And for the first time in a long time, the room felt alive. 3 days. Later, a small strike team left the hollow moon aboard the Argent Wake, stripped for stealth. Alara stood near the forward observation glass, armor sealed, breath slow. Rourke entered, handing her a datapad. Flight path uploaded. Intercept windows tight. We'll only have 20 minutes once we breach the node. She nodded. We'll make them count. Rourke hesitated. You really think the truth still matters to Earth? She didn't answer immediately. Then, not to the politicians, but somewhere out there, a kid's going to hear our voice. Maybe their family was erased. Maybe they were told it never happened. And maybe when they hear our story, they'll know they weren't crazy, that their pain was real. She turned, fierce now. And that's how revolutions start. As the stars stretched ahead of them and the dark shimmer of the Kirima drift pulsed closer, Alara reached for the intercom. "This is Commander Alara Khan. If you're hearing this, if you're still human, we're coming for the truth." Idris stood beside her. "Let's go light the fuse. The truth can't kill a regime, but it can burn a hole straight through its armor if you aim it right." Kirima Drift was a floating cathedral of data, a crystalline spire nestled in a web of dark matter and surveillance fog. The Varan called it Sovereign Shard, a place of purity and memory. But to Lara Khan, it looked like a tomb, one that sang lies to a galaxy that no longer questioned them. The Argent Wake hovered behind a cluster of broken asteroids, its hull cold, and masked in electromagnetic stillness. Inside, the team readied for infiltration. Rourke double-checked his uplink spike. "Once we breach the outer shell, we have 4 minutes before the shard floods the system with entropy runners. Those things will erase us from existence, and then write a report saying we never existed." Alara didn't flinch. "Then we don't give them the time." Idris locked the last pressure seals. "We go in quiet, hard. Plant the packet. Transmit full spectrum to every cum grid we can piggyback on." "And if it works?" Rourke asked. Alara looked through her visor at the shining monolith. "Then we put the truth back in the stars." The breach was surgical. The Wake's infiltration pod jetted silently across vacuum and latched onto a DECOM access port, old, unused, hidden beneath data scrubbers. Rourke cracked it open in 23 seconds. Alara led the team inside. 4 humans against an empire built on surveillance and silence. They moved like ghosts through the bowels of the shard. Lightless corridors, humming servers. The air was sterile, recycled 1,000 times through Varan biostacks. They passed by drones that hung from ceilings like sleeping wasps, their eyes dark. Then they reached it, the core spire, a vertical cathedral of information, pulses of compressed, like racing between crystal rods and interface vaults. In the center, the command node, locked, protected by quantum braid encryption. Rourke whistled low. "This is where truth goes to die." Alara stepped forward. "Then let's resurrect it." He connected the spike. 30 seconds in, alarms. Triggered. Soft at first, musical. The Varan didn't believe in sirens. Their alerts were harmonic signals embedded in the station's architecture, like a song changing key. Idris spoke calmly. "They know we're here." "Uploading," Rourke grunted. "Packet is feeding into secondary cores." "Just a few." More. A burst of sound shattered the air. Loren's sentinels dropped from the ceiling like knives, moving without sound, all motion and glinting edges. Alara didn't hesitate. Her rifle spun up and barked thunder. Idris covered the left flank, vaporizing the first sentinel with a rail charge. Rourke ducked low, shielding the spike with his body. Another Varan moved too fast. It closed the distance toward Alara, blade out, until a burst of plasma from behind blew its head apart. A young rebel Tari, barely 20, stood, wide-eyed behind her, rifle smoking. "I said I was backup," he whispered. Alara gave a small nod. Then Rourke shouted, "It's done." "Transmitting." The spike pulsed. The data surged. Terror reports. Executions labeled as resource reclamation. Earth's own Concord officials signing death warrants for outer colonies. All of it. Images, orders, names. Alara flipped. The manual override on the station's long-range comm. "Burn it through every satellite, every beacon, every drift relay. Make them choke on it." A deep rumble sounded above them. Not alarms this time. Varan reinforcements. A wall of kinetic force erupted from the tunnel. Idris grabbed Alara's shoulder. "Now!" They ran. The escape was chaos. Explosions rumbled through the station. Automated turrets sprang to life. Tari took a shot to the leg and screamed. Elara dragged him without hesitation. Rourke shielded the rear, firing until his rifle clicked dry. The extraction pod blasted from the shard, just as the override detonated, the spike rigged to overload. A shockwave of bright white burst from the spire. And with it, the truth flew across the stars. The Argent Wake limped into Eidolon. Anchorage 12 hours later, scraped and scorched. Tari was stabilized. Rourke had a cracked rib. Elara hadn't spoken in 2 hours. Then the transmission logs came in. Earth's pirate bands had caught it first. Civilian scavenger ships in the belt. A rebel listening post on Europa rebroadcasted. Someone smuggled it into Concord Prime and projected it onto the side of the Parliament Dome. Then came the uprisings. In 10 systems, protests sparked. In 2, police stations burned. And on the Terran Core net, where propaganda reigned, a clip went viral before being deleted. A woman, armor scorched, voice ragged, eyes full of fire. "This is Commander Elara Khan. They left us to die. They lied to you, but we survived. And we remember. You should too." But the flame came at a cost. The Varans struck back with precision. Within 2 days, they bombed the Mars Freeport into silence. They disabled 3 comm relays. They glassed the moons of Halvaris, where the first rebellion chant echoed in the dark. At Eidolon, a Comtech's hands trembled as he read the decoded intercept. Elara read it aloud. Subjugation Protocol Avum initiated. Reassertion imminent. Idris stared at her. "They're not just reacting. They're declaring war." "No," Elara whispered. "They're declaring correction." A silence settled over the command chamber. The galaxy had heard the truth, and now the Varin meant to erase it again. But this time, the ghosts were ready. The council room beneath Eidolon Anchorage thrummed with tension. Screens flickered under emergency power, casting long shadows across war-worn faces. A storm raged across the stars, and it was coming for them. Elara Khan stood before the gathered rebels, her arms still bandaged from Kiram Adrift, her voice low but unshaking. "They've activated Subjugation Protocol Avum. No more masks. No more Concord pretending to keep peace. The Varun are done whispering. They're coming to burn the memory of resistance off the map." No one argued. In the last 48 hours, 7 anchor points had gone dark. Orbital cities that once sent encrypted echoes now sent nothing at all. Silence wasn't peace. Anymore, it was death. Idris paced, his hands balled into fists. "They're triangulating us. They'll hit Eidolon next, and this time, there won't be a warning." Mila Voss, once admiral, now shadow leader of Eidolon, nodded solemnly. "We knew this day would come. The moment the galaxy remembered our names, we became a threat again." Elara glanced at the star chart. A Varin battle formation had entered the outer void. 2 dread carriers, 4 fleet killers, escorts by the dozen, a force meant to erase. And yet she stared harder. "They left a gap." Idris turned. "What?" "Here." She zoomed the map. A corridor through asteroid field, 0 to 9, a heavily shielded space. Too unstable for traditional drive systems. No sane pilot would chart it, which was exactly why the Varan didn't shield it. But Elara wasn't interested in sanity. "That's our shot." Rourke leaned forward. "A shot for what? Suicide?" "No." Alara's voice was steel. "A strike." The room fell silent. "You want to hit them head on?" Voss asked. "Not just hit them, cripple them." She walked to the center of the room, pulled a data spike from her pocket, and slammed it onto the console. The hologram lit up, flickering to reveal a massive schematic. Something ancient, incomplete, and marked eyes only. Dustfire Protocol. Idris's eyes widened. Is that what I think it is? Alara nodded. Project Dustfire. Initiated during the early years of the Varun War. A failsafe. A weapon Earth buried when the Concord signed away its soul. Voss squinted at the readout. Is it real? It's here, under us. Buried in the hollow crust beneath Eidolon. A ship, but not like any ship we've used in years. Rourke's voice was low, reverent. A relic, not Terran, not entirely. Hybrid tech. Human nerve sync fused. With stolen Varun constructs. She was built in desperation, never flown. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Alara stepped forward. She's our only chance. The lift to the undercrust was ancient, rusted, its voice box long dead. But the biometric reader still responded. To Alara's DNA, she had helped write the override commands when Duskfire was buried, decades ago, when she was still a captain in Black Ops. Before the surrender, before the fall, the doors creaked open, and there she was, half entombed in rock and steel, a sleek, jagged beast of a ship, black alloy veins pulsing dimly, like a sleeping predator dreaming of fire, 30 meters long, twin-drive coils interwoven with living metal. At the center, the helm core, a chair shaped like a skeleton's embrace, cables snaking into walls of neural lattice. Rourke stared in awe. She's alive. She's waiting, Alara said. The crew worked for 20 hours without pause. Fuel lines repressurized, neural sync arrays recalibrated, pulse cannons remounted. Each component awoke with a growl, or hum hungry for war. Milovus oversaw the launch authorization. You understand, this is a one-way run. If the Varun read you coming, they won't, Idris interrupted. Not until it's too late. And if it fails? She asked. Alara looked at the ship, then at the stars beyond the docking bay. Then they can bury me again. But I'll make damn sure they choke on the dirt. 1 hour before launch, Alara sat alone in the pilot cradle of the Dustfire. Cables connected to her spine, her thoughts bleeding into the ship's systems. Memories flared. Childhood, Earth's, sky before the war. The first time she killed. The first time she wept for a comrade. The cold sleep. The betrayal. The voice of the ship whispered to her. Directive? She whispered back. Vengeance. The launch was silent. No fanfare. No goodbyes. Just a dark blur vanishing into asteroid fog, shielded by rock and prayer. The Duskfire moved like no human ship. It bent space around its prow, drifted sideways through gravitational shears. Alara guided it not with hands, but thoughts, instinct, rage, resolve. At the edge of the asteroid corridor, she saw them, the Varun fleet, suspended in perfect symmetry. Like gods preparing to erase another myth. Alara grinned. Let's give them something new to believe in. In the command nexus of the Varun carrier, Kalazeth, the prime strategist registered the anomaly too late. A go signature, wrong gravity pattern, wrong mass distribution. Then, too late, right in the heart of their formation, a spear of black light tore from the veil. The Dustfire screamed into view. Plasma torpedoes roared from her flanks. One fleet killer exploded before it even armed shields. Another lost power as Alara overloaded its relay spine with a pulse forged. In Varun code, shock tore through the Varun ranks. They fired. Alara danced between firestorms. Her body burned. The ship bled. But she was inside it now, no longer separate. You left me in the dark, she whispered. Her ship answered. And now we return the favor. She dove straight into the heart of the dread carrier and fired. From Eidolon's high command. Deck, Idris stood frozen as sensors registered the impossible. A Varun dread carrier, gone. A second, spiraling into flames. The fleet, scattering. And at the center of it all, A single signal pulsed in rhythm across every open channel. We are human, and we do not forget. The wreckage of the Varun dread carrier Kelzoth drifted like a split continent across the void. Fires burned in vacuum, fed by ruptured reactors and flickering entropy cores. Bodies, some Varun, some Concord, tumbled in slow arcs, silhouetted against the growing starlight. And amid it all, still burning, still flying, was the dustfire. Elara Khan slumped in the neural cradle, her armor fused at the joints, blood mixing with coolant at her feet. Her right eye was blind. Her pulse faltered every third beat. But her mind remained sharp, locked in symbiosis with the ship that had become her vengeance. Every breath now cost her. But every second she lived was a weapon. She drifted on the fringe of the shattered formation, scanning what remained. One fleet killer crippled. 2 escorts retreating on full burn. And then, deeper in the formation, the true command node emerged. The Varan Obelisk-class carrier, Jarathel, larger than cities, ringed in shield bands and pulse towers. It hadn't moved. It had only watched. Observed the anomaly, calculated, and now it began to turn. Back at Eidolon anchorage, chaos had become rhythm. Captain Idris Harlan stood over the tactical deck, staring at a 3-dimensional feed of the battle zone. Elara's signal pulsed weak but clear. The dustfire was transmitting everything, even as it bled. We have a full read on their central. Command, his nav tech shouted. That carrier, it's their core. Take it out, and the entire protocol collapses. Comes? Idris asked. The tech shook his head. She's not answering. He stared at the feed. Watched Elara's lone ship spiral toward the Jarathel. Each move more erratic. Each flare weaker than the last. She's not going to. Make it alone. His hands tightened on the rail. Then she won't. The command center echoed with alarms as every flight-ready vessel in Eidolon launched. Old interceptors. Pirate-rigged haulers. Civilian crafts with weapons strapped to their flanks. A patchwork fleet of misfits and survivors, every one of them carrying names the Varun thought erased. Elara had drawn blood. Now humanity would finish what she started. Inside the duskfire, the cradle groaned under the strain. The ship's voice buzzed in Elara's mind, weaker now. Structural integrity, 21%. Neural link degrading. Keep going, she whispered, coughing blood. This course will result in termination. She smiled faintly. Then let it be a good death. She activated the final subroutine, Lazarus Burn, an overclock protocol designed to overload both Varen and human systems. Suicide code, but not before delivery. She plodded a vector straight into the Jarathel's underbelly, its shield anchors exposed from reorientation. A gap no warship could exploit. But she wasn't just a warship. She was fury. She was memory, and she was already dead. The Jarathel responded. Flares of defense pulses, rings of charged plasma, anti-grav fields rippling like halos. Everything the Varan knew. Every piece of tech meant to deny entry or end the approach of madness. Elara flew through all of it. Her ship burned, her mind frayed, her body screamed. But her purpose remained intact. Then, the void trembled. From behind asteroid belts and forgotten orbitals, dozens of Terran vessels emerged, Eidolon's fleet in full scream. Idris at the helm of the Argent Wake, Rourke in a patched-up strike fighter, Tari barely standing, piloting a double gun. Skiff with one arm. They fell upon the Varin line like wolves. The space around the Jarathel ignited. Escorts broke formation under the chaos. Varan cannons fired in every direction. But they hadn't prepared for chaos. They had planned for silence, order, obedience. What came for them instead was madness, human, defiant, untamed. The Argent Wake rammed a cruiser at point-blank range, ejecting its reactor core in a suicide volley before skimming out of range. Fighters spiraled through breach points. Rourke strafed control towers until his ammo ran dry, and fired flares just to blind them. Every ship screamed Alara's name. And at the center, the Duskfire screamed louder. Inside the cradle, everything was breaking. The ship's voice was fragmented. Link, failing. Fusion instability rising. Alara, I'm here, she whispered. I'm still here. She locked the burn vector, set the override, and opened the final broadcast. CHANNEL, full range, full power. One last message before the ship broke her bones and atomized her blood. This is Commander Alara Khan. I was left to die in the dark. I was forgotten, buried, betrayed, but I crawled out. I remembered, and I chose to make sure no one forgets again. You can erase history, but you can't erase what we are. The Duskfire struck the Jarathel like a god's hammer. The explosion folded time. A white firestorm ripped the Varin carrier open, tearing through its inner sanctum and reality anchors. Shockwaves thundered through the fleet. Systems failed. Shields collapsed. Protocol Avum shattered. The last thing the Varin saw before their flagship fell was a human broken burning who refused to die quietly. On Eidolon, the transmission ended. Silence followed. And then applause, screams, tears. Because in that moment, across systems and shadows, humanity saw what it was still capable of. Not submission, not fear, but fire. A week after the Jarathel fell, the galaxy was no longer quiet. Across fractured skies and broken relay chains, the footage spread like wildfire. Alara's last transmission, her voice ragged and full of fury, was replayed in bunkers, market, squares, deep core mining hubs, and the blood-slick command centers of crumbling Concord strongholds. She had become legend overnight. And now, the legend was marching. From the ruins of Eidolon's outer ring, Captain Idris Holland stood at the center of a growing armada, not polished, not clean, but human to the core. He looked out over the ragtag fleet assembling in orbit, over 100 ships now. Fighters welded from scrap, cargo freighters stripped for speed, smuggler war rigs with names painted in vengeance, Burning Sky, Truthwalker, The Forgotten, Khan's Promise, and Argent Wake, reborn and rearmed, the warhorse that refused to die. They answered, Rourke muttered beside him, jaw tight with disbelief. They heard her, Idris said. Then he turned toward the Holotable. A final Varan citadel had risen, a last monstrous war construct known only in Concord dread. Files as the throat. Stationed at the edge of the Galactic Veil, it was part fortress, part AI-controlled soul farm. The Varan used it to absorb thought, strip memory, override resistance. The last place any human captive was taken. It had never been breached until now. The War Council was short. Idris, Rourke, Mila Voss, and 10 rebel captains stood around a flickering star map, one long breath away from extinction. No one's asking you to follow us, Idris said, voice heavy. This isn't for victory. This is for truth. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting so they never forget we've stood. Rourke looked around. If we die today, let them carve it into the void with our bones. Humanity chose defiance. The youngest captain, a boy named Leo, 16 years old, born in a mining cell, never seen real sky, stepped forward and saluted. My ship's ready. I've got nothing but rage and a coil gun held together with prayers. Someone laughed. Another banged their fist on the table. And so it began. The fleet emerged from quantum shadow 5 clicks off the throat's outer shield. No warning, no declaration, just vengeance. The throat activated instantly, its black hull shifting, opening like an eye. The eye defense sentinels shrieked into formation. Entropy beams lanced outward, vaporizing 3 fighters in the first 10 seconds. The sky turned into fire. But the rebels didn't scatter. They howled. Idris led the charge in the Argent wake, barrel rolling through the chaos, slamming disruptor bombs into the tower's main relay spines. The burning sky flew straight into a drone cluster, taking 7 with her in a suicide dive. And the voice of Alara Khan still echoed across every ship's comms. This is not surrender. This is humanity standing tall for the last time, and making the universe remember why we mattered. Inside the throat, the I Prime registered 17 breach points. Then 30. Then 63. Impossible. Human tactics weren't this coordinated. They weren't this bold. They weren't supposed to burn this bright. But they did. They always had, when pushed to the edge. In the core of the Citadel, Idris and his boarding team punched through the inner data sanctum. Gunfire blazed in 0. Gravity. Screams echoed through silver corridors. The AI's voice thundered from walls like a god trying to reason with ants. You are anomalies. You are irrational. You serve nothing but emotion and entropy. You will be erased. Rourke snarled back, tossing a core disruptor. Good. We'll make the void feel something for once. They reached the memory crucible, a chamber of neural coils strung with the stolen consciousness of thousands. Human minds trapped in. Endless loops, overwritten by Varin logic, and Idris saw her. Ilara's memory, fractured, raw, strung across a neural prism, alive, or something like it. Her last thoughts etched into the system like fire. You didn't kill me. You made me eternal. He placed the last pulse bomb into the core chamber. Then he whispered, You were never alone. Outside, the rebel fleet was dying, but not breaking. The Truthwalker took 3 hits to the engine, but stayed on course. The Khan's Promise lost its left wing and kept firing. Every loss bought a second. Every death made the story louder. And then, a silence. The throat's main shields flickered. And in that instant, the Argent Wake broadcast a final override key. Ilara's last protocol. Duskfire's gift. A virus of human thought. Fragmented memories, grief, rage, love, laughter. The things no machine could parse. It flooded the AI network like wildfire, corrupting it not with logic, but with humanity. The throat howled. The walls shook. And then it collapsed from within. The explosion was felt for minutes. And in the aftermath, the void was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't silence out of fear. It was silence out of awe. Alara was gone, but her fire had lit 1,000 more. The stars didn't change when the throat died. They didn't blink, they didn't speak. But for the first time in generations, they listened. Debris from the shattered citadel floated for weeks, its jagged metal bones wrapped in frozen fire. Echoes of the final explosion rippled outward in gravitational waves that tickled instruments on the far edges of the Orion Arm. And at the heart of it all, where once a monstrous machine devoured souls, there was now silence, but not the kind that erased, the kind that remembered. On Igoan Anchorage, the wounded limped through halls that had once sung with evacuation alarms. Now they were quiet, filled only with voices of those who survived. Idris Harlan stood on the upper concourse, watching ships land in the half-rebuilt dockyard. Most were damaged. Some barely held together. One had Ilara's name scrawled on its side in jagged red paint. He didn't smile. He hadn't smiled since the final detonation. But he stood tall. Behind him, Rourke approached, holding a battered datapad. We've had 37 new colonies send word. They're breaking Concord ties, rejecting Varin mandates. Flying. The can signal. He tapped the pad. A logo appeared, a burning star, split down the center by a spear. No name, no flag, just a symbol, a warning, a memory, a promise. She changed everything, Rourke said quietly. No, Idris replied. She reminded us who we are. Across the galaxy, the uprising spread. On Concord Prime, protesters. Lit flares at the foot of the council spires, not to burn them down, but to demand truth, to demand answers. They held images of Alara Khan, faces painted with ash, chanting in ancient Terran dialect. She burned, so we could speak. In the deep reaches of the Persine dust, survivors of forgotten colonies began emerging, broadcasting broken messages of defiance, asking for contact, for unity. They had thought themselves alone, but Ilara's final signal proved they were not. Even on Varin-held worlds, fissures formed. Not all of the enemy had been soulless. Some watched the footage, listened to the broadcasts, questioned. One high-caste Varin diplomat was executed for leaking her voice into internal archives. Her words became a virus, not of code, of conscience. Idris returned to the undercrust one last time. The dust fire was gone, incinerated in the heart of the Jarathel, but its launch tunnel remained, charred, cold, sacred. He stood there in silence until Mila Voss joined him. She knew it was a suicide run, Mila said. She never called it that. What did she call it? Idris turned, voice hollow. History. They stood in silence. Then she handed him a worn metal plate, a name tag, half melted, recovered from the debris field. Khan, Alara rank, commander status, presumed alive. He stared at the last line, smiled. She'd like that. Years passed. The war didn't end overnight. The Varin retreated in stages, burning what they couldn't hold. Concord fractured, split by truth and shame. But humanity, scarred, limping, divided, rose again. The idol and accord replaced the treaty of subjugation. New Terran banners were flown, not of empire, but of memory. Ships were built with names like Silent Fire, Echo of Her, and the Kayan Directive. Children were taught her story not in whispers, but in poems, born of silence, raised in fire, left to die, but climbed still higher. She lit the stars so we could see what being human means to be. In a quiet valley on a moon untouched by war, a monument was raised. No statues, just a field of mirrors, all tilted skyward, each etched with a name of someone the galaxy tried to erase. At the center, a single metal plate, worn, burned, but legible. Alara Khan Commander, Survivor, Spark. She was never alone. Beneath it, a final inscription. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human. END.